Good evening. Welcome to this January 16th, 2024 meeting of the Norfolk City Council. I will call the meeting to order and call your attention to the Open Meetings Act posted here in the council chambers. You now please join me in rising for a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance. Roll call, please.
Granquist.
Here.
Arns.
Here.
Webb.
Here.
McCarthy.
Here.
Murin.
Here.
Snorton.
Here.
Boston.
Here.
Hildebrand.
Here.
Okay, with that, I would look for a motion to approve the consent agenda with one change. There's been a request to remove item number 11 from consent and move it to the regular agenda.
So moved.
Motion second. If no discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Motion carries.
With that, would look for a motion to approve the full agenda.
So moved.
Motion second. If no discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Motion carries.
All right, that takes us to number 11 on what was the consent agenda. Would look for a motion to consider approval of resolution 2024-4 requesting authorization from the mayor and city council for the city of Norfolk staff to apply for a civic and community center financing fund construction grant and authorization for mayor and city staff to execute the grant application and all related documents.
All over consideration of approval of resolution 2024-4.
I'll second.
Motion second. And for some background on this, we'll hear from Candace Alder, our Economic Development Director.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. You have in front of you a resolution that would authorize us to apply for Civic and Community Center Financing Fund grant dollars from the Nebraska Department of Economic Development. This is a partnership with the River Point Creative District, and it would go towards the purpose of updating and enhancing the safety and ambiance of the River Point Creative District through the planning and implementation of wayfinding, permanent lighting with 4 areas of focus. So the different areas of focus that we're looking at is alleyway lighting, intersection lighting, some lighting that would be incorporated into the amphitheater at Johnson Park, and then some corridor lighting that really guide people from the downtown district to the River Point development project. Right now, we're currently proposing to apply for the maximum grant asked. That's $1,125,000. The match that we're looking at using for that is a combination of vehicle parking district funds that were set aside in this most recent budget, private donations that were a part of the overall riverfront development project, and then some Keno dollars that were already incorporated into the riverfront development project.
Thank you, Candace. So Norfolk's been awarded this grant before on other projects, but it's a little bit different this time around given the connection to the Creative Arts District. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so for this funding year, they did restrict funding for CCCFF grants to creative districts. And so we've worked with a lot of the community partners to go through strategic planning with the creative district and apply, and then we've received our creative district designation. We actually just hired a coordinator that will fulfill the day-to-day activities for the creative district.
So the funds this year are eligible only to those communities that have established creative districts. Is that true?
That's correct, and only within those creative district boundaries.
And this is money that the state has set aside for these specific purposes. It's a competitive grant process, and grant funding can be used only for those stated purposes, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Can you tell everybody a little bit more about the River Point Creative District, what that is? Is there a board? Is it a nonprofit? What is it?
Sure. So right now, there's 3 entities that partnered together to apply for the Creative District designation. And so you have the Norfolk Arts Center as one of those partners, the Norfolk Area Visitors Bureau is another, and then Growing Together Northeast Nebraska, which is our workforce initiative that's really focused on the attraction and retention of young professionals and students to Northeast Nebraska and downtown Norfolk in particular. There is a committee, and I'm not positive where they're at right now with their formal umbrella for the Creative District, but they did receive funding, which came through the Arts Center through the first round of designations to the state of Nebraska, I believe in the amount of $250,000.
So will this money go to them, or will this come into the VPD or to the city? Where would this money go if we awarded the grant?
Sure, so these grant dollars would come to the city of Norfolk, and then we would execute the all the activities under this umbrella. It wouldn't be a pass-through from the city to the Creative District, but we would work in close proximity to that committee. We've also been engaging the various downtown stakeholders, such as those that are exploring a business improvement district and those that sit on the board of the vehicle parking district, just to make, and the Downtown Norfolk Association. We have a lot of different groups that are engaged in downtown activities that we've been trying to communicate different activities through.
So the city would hold the money from the grant and then disperse the funds?
Correct. And that's just how the state of Nebraska sets things up.
And Candace, tonight this agenda item simply allows the city to make application. The council authorizes staff to make application for the grant.
Correct.
Okay.
We've already passed through approval from the Nebraska Arts Council, which required a pre-approval in December. And then we did submit a letter of intent to the Nebraska Department of Economic Development last week that we intended to apply. This would be the final formal allowance for our team to move forward with that formal application.
Okay. Thank you.
I think what makes it unique, though, is that the Creative Art District is not governed by any elected body. So I'm glad that we're holding the funds and that we're dispersing the funds. So.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you. Any other discussion or input?
Jim McKenzie. The reason I had this requested this be pulled was to understand the financing of it. So from what Candace said, that you're asking for a $1.1 million grant, is that correct?
$1,125,000.
Okay. And according to the resolution, there's a matching fund requirement of 1-to-1, is that correct? So the city has to come up with $1.1 million also?
So as I stated, we used funds that were already set aside as a part of the riverfront development project that were not leveraged by any other grants that were requested or received for that project. And then we also included some funds from the vehicle parking district that were set aside in their 23-24 budget, as well as a private donation for someone in the downtown district looking to boost these activities.
So my question is, I know the VPD budget is pretty small. I don't know how many, I guess I'm curious how many dollars are VPD dollars, how many dollars are private dollars, and how many dollars are tax dollars, Keno dollars?
Right now, I don't have the budget in front of me. We're looking at potentially the use of up to $500,000 of Keno funds. Again, those are already dedicated to that project. And then we would look at $85,000 of Keno dollars, or a vehicle parking district funds that were set aside specifically for lighting. And then there were also multiple private donations from the community that we would be looking at to leverage as well.
So, if I understand it, you're looking at over $500,000 of Keno and tax dollars? That's kind of what you're saying. So, I guess my question is, that's a significant amount of money. Again, we keep going to the police department saying we can't afford that. Here's another $500,000 of money that's going into this. And I realize you're saying it's Keno money. Well, Keno money affects what you spend on parks, and so it's all coming out of the same pocket eventually. So the question is, that's a big sum of money. I mean, significant. So I just want that to be clear as to, again, where that, there was nothing in the agenda that said how many dollars, tax dollars or anything. So I just want to understand that and know what kind of dollars we're spending. So it sounds like over $500,000 of tax dollars are going to go into that. Yeah.
It's coming from Keno funds that we have designated for, Keno funds when the public voted on that, were designated funds for parks. So, I mean, that's exactly what, but not for what has been done in the past was Parks was operating some of their budget off of Keno dollars. We've now taken that out of their budget. So Keno dollars are set aside for particular projects like that involve, I guess, Parks and Rec and baseball
Community
fields,
betterment,
soccer fields.
And I believe you've opened up Keno so it can be used for any community improvement, and that could even include the police department now, correct?
With the Keno dollars,
Right.
I suppose essentially you could.
So, again, you're.
But then you'd be going against what the traditional Keno dollars were set for by what the public expects out of those dollars.
I understand.
You know
but
what I'm saying? So it's,
I think you've already crossed that bridge before with some other uses of Keno dollars, so.
well, they've gone to trails, they've gone to help finance trails, they've gone to help with the YMCA, some of the stuff that they went there, and in numerous projects that Keno's worked on over the years, but the council priority dollars are another thing, Jim, that we've set aside, and those get used quite often across the board, for a long time, it helped pay for this building we're in right now. Council priority dollars did, so.
Right. I'm just saying you've got limited dollars, and
Jim, I think,
this is a big
I
expense.
think some clarification here from Candace, but I believe these are dollars that have already been committed for the last 2 or 3 years as part of our funding for Johnson Park. These are dollars committed already. We're not committing new dollars for this. We're taking the funds that have been budgeted and committed, and we're leveraging those dollars towards this grant. So we're not spending new Keno dollars.
Okay, so these are dollars that have been in past budgets,
Correct.
okay, and are in that parks,
Is that what I understand, Candace? Yes.
okay, okay.
In addition to VPD dollars that are designated to that specific area of town. And private donation. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
All right. Any other discussion? Hearing none, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, resolution 2024-4 is adopted.
Takes us to item number 15 on the agenda under special presentations. We will hear from Chief Don Miller of the Norfolk Police Division on police department interpreter needs. Chief.
Hello, Mayor and Council. Thanks for this opportunity to speak. This is directed probably more than anything to any of the citizens who happen to be listening in, whether it's today or in the future. We're pretty fortunate in Norfolk to have a very diverse community. And as part of that, as first responders, we have an obligation to do everything we possibly can to make sure that we communicate as effectively as we can with every one of those diverse languages. Over the years, we've used a wide variety of resources, whether that is phone services, online services, in-person, current staff, and we're always looking at ways to improve. One of the ways that we are trying to improve is our on-call interpreter list. We currently have 4 staff that are very fluent in Spanish, and Spanish is a primary one. This applies to any other languages we might run into. So if there's anybody who is bilingual in other languages, this would apply as well. So we have our current staff, and they get called on duty and off duty pretty regular to help interpret for various needs. That could be a 3-minute phone call on a 911 call, helping to clarify what the needs are, to a long multiple hour or sometimes multiple day investigation for criminal investigations. And we've always had an interpreter list that we've maintained. It's always been, we haven't been very proactive at maintaining that. And my goal today is to bring awareness to our interpreter list, and I want to be a little proactive in trying to expand that. So what we're doing is we're kind of revisiting that. If there's any, make it aware that people were doing this, if there's any citizens who are bilingual in any 2 languages or more. We ask that they reach out to us. We're going to be going through a process to vet them. Of course, we have to have a little bit of a selection process. But our city HR, Nancy Wright, is going to be collecting the applications and asking anybody who is bilingual to reach out. And they're not going to be city employees. It's going to be a per hour pay like we've done for decades. But if anybody has questions, they're free to reach out to me or to reach out to Captain Bauer at the police station. And we can work around people. I mean, if some interpreters are certified, some are not certified. If somebody is fluent and bilingual, they don't need to be certified to help us with a 911 call. Sometimes that's just a quick thing that we can do. They don't need to come into the station. We can do it over the phone. So if we can call them at home, conference call, we do that pretty regular. And I just don't think that some of the community recognizes that there is a way for them to get involved and to assist the citizens in their bilingual communities by helping the police department with those. And we'll work around people's schedules if they're only available day or night. We of course are 24/7. So I wanted to take this opportunity to bring an awareness to the council, to the public. We'll be advertising on our social media and getting some more information out there in the near future. But this was a great opportunity to bring it up and to start this process, to be a little proactive in making sure the citizens understand. We want to work with them any way we can, and that's clearly a need that we have, is communicating with the citizens. So is there any questions that I can answer? Otherwise, I can direct any questions to anybody to just call the normal police station number, 644-8700, and ask for me or Captain Bauer, and we can answer those questions. But we want to be proactive and do everything we can to communicate with anybody who needs that.
Chief, I do have a question. So how often do you think that need is when you get phone calls in? How often do you need to use
It
that
ebbs and
service?
flows, but daily. I would say it would not be unusual to have. I had a meeting with my current translators, and they said that they might go several days without a call, and then they might get 3 calls in one day. So it ebbs and flows. We have, like I said, we have online services. We have some resources for the officers to use on scene. We send our officers to training when we have that opportunity. But it happens fairly regular. And that's, our on-staff interpreters are getting a little burned out. That's kind of what started this conversation, is that they're happy to help out, but if we can find some relief and some more resources, we definitely want to do that as well.
So when you say on staff, are you talking actual dispatch unit is bilingual?
I have 2 dispatchers and 2 patrol officers that are fully bilingual. There's several others who have the ability to get through a traffic stop, so to speak, or to get through a basic call, but they're not fluent. But I have 2 dispatchers and 2 officers that are fluent.
And even with 2 dispatchers, you think there's an additional need?
Absolutely. We have 4 shifts, and the dispatchers work 4 different shifts. So at best, 50% of the time they would happen to be working.
And so do you need actually additional dispatcher help currently?
Well, we do. That's a conversation that we want to address, but we've looked at our dispatching needs, and we feel that there is a need for additional dispatching staff. If they're bilingual, that would be a huge bonus. Can't always guarantee that, of course, but that would definitely be a plus if somebody was bilingual.
Thank you.
You bet.
Chief, what happens right now if you get a call and neither of those bilingual dispatchers are available? How's that handled?
If they are available?
If they're not available.
If they're not available.
Yeah.
Then we use the language line, which is something that the city has utilized for quite a while. Google Translate does amazingly well in a pinch. But we've always been been here for 33 years, and we have always managed to get by. Not as well as we might like to, but we call one of the 4 people at home, wake them up in the middle of the night and ask them to help us out.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I mean, we all have to sleep, and
Not
we like to
ideal
avoid calling
situation.
them in the middle of the night, but we've always been able to find somebody to help us out, but we want to expand that list.
Right. Makes sense. Okay.
Chief, would this be an opportunity for somebody to become more involved with the police department and possibly move into a career with the police?
Absolutely. I mean, we're always looking, whether it's the police officer positions, whether it's the dispatcher positions, school resource officers, community service officers. We're always looking for people who are wanting to be more involved with the community. And for the right people, it could very easily be a stepping stone in the right direction. And they can test drive the police department, see if it's what they like, and we can have the opportunity to get to know them as well. And it can be something very part-time. It could be something pretty regular, but it gives somebody a chance to earn a little bit of extra money, utilizing their resources. And of course, they're going to get paid for it. We're not asking them to do it for free.
Okay. Thank you, Chief, for bringing that
Thank you, everybody.
need forward, and maybe some of our friends in the news media can help us spread the word. All right, that will move us on to official action. Item number 16 on the council agenda under public hearings and related action. I will open this public hearing to consider a request from TTK Investments Incorporated to consider a zoning change from R3 multiple family residential to C2 Central Business District on property addressed as 301 North First Street. And to open the hearing and provide us some background on this, Val Grimes, our city planner, please.
Thank you. I've brought up on the screen just so that you all knew which piece of property we're talking about. This is essentially the northwest corner of First Street and where Nebraska went through the park. And this zone change, like you mentioned, is from R3 to C2 because the owner would like to utilize the existing building on that lot and change it to a bike shop. And so that is the request before us, and thought it was appropriate with other C2 just being right there in downtown. There is an existing house on there with a tenant. My understanding, the applicant is here, but that tenant is looking for a different place to live so that when that happens, prior to the bike shop opening, that house will be no longer lived in and potentially down because it is in rough shape, I believe. So then it would clean up that zoning also, so it would be compliant at that point in time. If there's any questions.
Thank you, Val. Any questions? This is a public hearing, so anyone wishing to make comment can do so now.
Val, has Planning Commission seen this?
Yeah, they saw it at their last one, and it was I believe, a 7-0 vote to recommend approval of the zone change.
Thank you.
One question, just maybe clarify more than anything. Is adequate sewer and water available? Says yes, new service needs to be installed for the building. New water line in front to be used in private sewer line. Assuming public?
Steve, do you know the answer to that one? Is there a private sewer line?
Yes, he has a private sewer line that runs from his current house right now. It goes all the way north to, is that Prospect? So that's where his line ties into right now.
Up here.
So when we were working with, had a couple plumbers contact us, kind of getting the cost estimate and stuff, suggestion that we had there was to reuse the existing sewer and the water line that's at the house. So when the house gets demoed, then go ahead and tie onto that. So the water line at that location is extremely deep. That's the new line that we bored in. So, I mean, it's probably about that 12 to 13 foot deep in that area. So we recommended from our office to go ahead and use the existing service that's at the house when the house gets demoed. So.
Thank you, Chad. not to put him on the spot, but I see the property owner is here and welcome to say a few words on your intent with the property if you'd like to do that.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Yeah, pretty much that was it in a nutshell. I just want to turn it into a bike shop with a retail repair, rentals, maybe a coffee bar type thing. Some places are doing like a beer or, libation type thing outside, patio thing in the summertime. Probably not much going on in the winter. But yeah, we do have some concerns or whatever with how to get the sewer and water to it. Looks like we'll have to just tie in with the house because that is a really deep line, and the cost of doing that's going to be pretty high to tie into the new water line going underneath.
Very good. Thank you, Jason. I appreciate that. And seems to make a lot of sense, that location for what you plan to do with the business there. So thank you. Is a public hearing? Anyone else wishing to make comment can do so? Okay. Hearing no one else, I would ask for a Planning Commission report, please.
The Norfolk Planning Commission held a public hearing on January 3rd, 2024 at the request of TTK Investments, Inc. to consider a zoning change from R3 Multiple Family Residential District to C2 Central Business District on property address as 301 North 1st Street. Planning Commission recommends approval of the request with a 7-0 vote.
Thank you. With that, I will close the hearing and move to item number 17. Would entertain a motion to consider ordinance number 5866 approving zoning change from R3 to C2 on property addressed as 301 North 1st Street.
I will offer for consideration ordinance number 5866.
Second.
Motion second. Any other discussion on this, council? Hearing none. Short title, please.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Madison County, Nebraska, amending the zoning district map of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska, providing when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and providing for the publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Ordinance number 5866 carries on first reading.
I'll make a motion to suspend the rules and waive the second and third readings.
Second.
Motion and second to suspend the rules and approve on second and third readings. If no further discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Ordinance number 5866 carries on second and third.
Okay, that takes us to our regular agenda. Item number 18. I would entertain a motion to consider approval of a public transportation funding agreement between the City of Norfolk and North Fork Area Transit.
I'll make a motion for consideration of approval.
Second.
Okay, motion and second. And for some background on this, first we'll hear from Danny, our city attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. The public transportation funding agreement that is before you tonight is between the City of Norfolk and North Fork Area Transit. For purposes of this conversation, I will refer to the organization as NFAT. This agreement is presented at the request of NFAT representatives, and it follows meetings between NFAT city staff and elected officials. NFAT representatives attended as Policies and Procedures Subcommittee meeting on January 3rd, 2024, to discuss the request for funding as well as changes that NFAT has implemented since the alleged fraud by their previous executive director, which resulted in a criminal case that is still pending. There were 4 subcommittee members present during this conversation. 3 voted to move the funding agreement forward to this full council, and 1 member left the meeting early and was unable to vote. This agreement is like the previous agreement between the city and NFAT, which was terminated by Resolution 2023-13 on February 21st of last year. However, there are several key differences between the previous agreement and the one attached here, which are as follows. First, this agreement is not renewable and it contemplates $100,000 total divided quarterly. The first payment will be $50,000 since NFAT's fiscal year is already underway, but the 2 additional $25,000 payments will be made in April and July of 2024. This allows the City Council to cautiously evaluate the operational progress of NFAT and allows INFAT to come back to the table during summer 2024 budget meetings to request future funding. Number 2, this agreement expands on the previous audit requirements and places more responsibility on INFAT to provide documentation to the city when requested. The agreement allows the city to hire an auditor during the agreement and also requires INFAT to notify the city if any governmental agency should initiate an investigation into its operations. Number 3, this agreement adds a section that requires INFAT to notify the city if the State Department of Transportation should decline to fulfill a reimbursement request, and gives the city the option to immediately terminate the agreement, dependent on the circumstances surrounding the denial of such reimbursement. Number 4, this agreement formalizes what was put into place on February 21st of last year with the approval of Resolution 2023-13. This requires INFAT to have at least one Norfolk City Council member on its board of directors. Councilman Webb is currently filling that role. I'm happy to answer any questions pertaining to this agreement, but at this time I would defer to the representatives that are here from INFAT that want to speak to some of the things that they put in place in terms of their operations.
Thank you, Danny.
Mayor and Council, thank you for having us. My name is Lacey Kimes. I'm the board president for North Fork Area Transit. You have in front of you just a short presentation of who we are and where we are today. North Fork Area Transit, we are a private, nonprofit organization. We have provided public transportation for the city of Norfolk and surrounding communities since 1973. You can see on the left there, the trip purposes we have broken down. 50% of the trips that are provided are for work. 20% of those trips are for education. 25% for healthcare, and 5% other, such as shopping, going to see family and friends, and social events like that. And then you'll see on the right that we also have a list of people that use North Fork Area Transit and what they're using the service for. Individuals with disabilities, individuals that are not able to drive, students, senior citizens, veterans, and people just choosing to use public transit. They're not comfortable driving, or they enjoy the social aspect of using public transportation. And then you'll see on slide 2 that North Fork Area Transit is part of a larger system across the state. NFAT applies for state transit system funding, and that's what we refer to as the 5311 funding. North Fork Area Transit has actually received this funding, 5311, for over 50 years. That funding comes from the Federal Transit Administration, and then it goes down to the state level, which is split among the 52 transit agencies in Nebraska. And you can see there through the blue arrows on how that funding is split across the state. On the next slide shows our ridership on the left-hand slide, or the left-hand side of it. You can see on the left that North Fork Area Transit provided about 3,900 rides just in the month of November. So that averages about 130 rides a day. About 3,300 rides per month is about what we average. And you can see that since our restart, as you remember, in 2023, North Fork Area Transit, the doors were closed all of January, February, March, and opened back up April 6th. But you can see that the ridership has been consistent even since then. Each month, you can see the 3 groups of riders. Our Telelift Public is the majority of our riders. That's what you see in purple each month. And then our disabled, that small part in green there, that's actually probably about 150 riders each month that have a disability that need to use our services. And then you can see at the top of that is our Great Dane riders. Our Great Dane riders alone is about 30 to 35 riders every day that are picked up in Norfolk, taken to work in Wayne, and then brought back to Norfolk. Great Dane alone in the month of November had 978 riders. And then you can see on the right-hand side, that's our historic annual ridership trends. So you can see starting from 2016 until through 2023, you can kind of see how it's gone up. You can see in 2021 and 2022, we had about 40,000 rides for the year, and that was only our telelift service. So that's our curb to curb. You call ahead, schedule your ride, we'll come pick you up. That's our most popular service. And then going into 2023 and 2024, we're already on track to do 40,000 rides for the year, despite being closed January, February, and March of 2023. So you can see that although we were closed 3 months in 2023, the need was still very much there, and we are already back to where we were when we were just providing that telelift service. And then our next slide, you can see our highest volume of pickup locations on the left-hand side, and a list there of our most common spots where we pick up riders. And then on the right, our most common spots where we drop off riders at. And then a map there just kind of gives you an idea of where our service area goes out to, about 30 to 35 miles, and the communities that includes. And then the next slide, as Danny mentioned prior, we are generally here in August to discuss the next year's agreement with you, but our agency was delayed because of our focus being on getting reimbursements from NDOT and getting an audit in place. So although we are halfway through this fiscal year, we are seeking an agreement for July 1st of 23 through June 30th of 24. You can see on the left-hand side, our current expenses, our non-operating cost is there at $895,000. Those are reimbursed at 90%. And then our operating costs of $609,800, and those are reimbursed about 75%. So then our cost of service is $1,504,800. Below that, our revenue summary. That is where I talked about the 5311 funding that we apply for and that we receive. That funding is at 1.1 million, just over 1.1 million. And the local match that's required, because we receive that funding, we are required to locate $219,400 to meet that local match requirement. And then our fares come in at about $90,000 for the year. And there you can see our total funding. On the right-hand side, that's where we have currently our local match support for the fiscal year 2024. City of Norfolk, our ask for the agreement is $100,000. United Way has agreed to $10,000. We are United Way recipients. Aero Stage Lines, we do receive an administrative fee of about $1,100 a month. We are the nonprofit that actually applies for that funding that Aero Stage Line needs to be able to offer that regional route that goes to Omaha and back from Norfolk every day. So we partner with them to be able to provide that service for our community. And so we collect about a $13,200 administrative fee for helping with that. Faith Regional at $25,000, United Healthcare at $25,000, and then there's our Great Dane route that I talked about. They just gave $92,000 for the year. $46,000 would be for the current fiscal year that we are in. And then that brings our total match that we have located at $219,200. I'm open to any questions that you might have. If I can't answer, I can try to get you an answer.
Lacey, I got a question on your 3,900 rides per month. If we use Great Dane for an example, is that considered a one ride there and one ride back, or is that a one-way trip, or a round trip to and back?
One trip, just a single trip. Because we do have some riders that don't necessarily use it both ways for whatever reason, so it's just one way.
Okay. And 3,900 is average riders per month
Correct.
So on the graph chart of 2022 and 2023, that ends at 70,000 ridership. Is that what I'm understanding?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
3,900 times 12 is 48,000.
For 2022, 2023.
Talking about a 2-year cycle, right?
Yeah.
The 2-year cycle.
I can get some clarification on that for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. I guess I don't understand the question.
You were saying for the year, you were trying to get the average, but it was closed for 3 months, so I didn't know.
I'll add a little.
No, my question
clarification.
was that I was trying to figure out how we got to 70,000.
In 22, 23.
Those are 2 years. We're talking about 2 years.
Forklift was operating, so that difference is the forklift ridership.
Okay, thank you.
Of that 219,000 that you showed on that second to last screen, are there no private, I mean, these look like you have 6 donations. Do you have any private donations? Any other donations other than these 6?
We do have some smaller ones that have come in needing like smaller rides here. So like, for example, churches. We've had a couple churches here in Norfolk that needed the service for something that was going on at their church. So then that would be able to go towards our local match. So for instance, Our Savior Lutheran Church, their parking lot was being redone however many months ago that was. So then they paid Norfolk Area Transit to provide rides for their members to be able to get from the old Office Max over to Our Savior Lutheran Church. And so what they paid us for that service, that goes into our local match.
That's a local match, that's not a fair.
No, I think some of that went into, I'm not 100% sure on that, Frank, but we can find out.
I'm just looking at the 100,000 requests from the city of Norfolk and just find that there's only 6 other local supporters, or 5 others, I should say.
Well, just think of how much we've built back, and we're gaining community confidence. We're gaining the confidence in our partners. That's the next step, is gaining community confidence to get those donations to come in. I think we're knocking on that door right now, and I think we're gaining that confidence in the community. So
I think that's important to note, Councilman, and I know you're close to it because you're on that board. But in all reality, we're talking about a system that saw a shock, unfortunate, expected shock to the system not that long ago. And I think it's the board members, the new board members who have come on, existing board members who have worked really hard to come up with I think a smart, dedicated recovery plan that ensures that people who find this service critical to their daily lives, it can be continued. Obviously, we see the need for it. Lacey, you can speak to that. You've been part of this effort from the beginning when it was when Norfolk Transit was revived. And so, yeah, some of those questions, there was a wider network of private donation support a year and a half ago. I think some of that probably dropped off, wondering if the system would survive. And I think the answer is it is surviving. It can. And Lacey, maybe it's an opportunity to talk about operationally some of the reforms that have been made within NFAT to get the system back on its feet and to be sustainable moving forward. Either you or other board members can talk about that.
Sure. So immediately we hired a local accounting firm to take charge of all of the accounting, the payroll, money coming in, money going out. That was immediately done. We've added more board members to our board, including a city council member. We have bi-weekly board meetings still. We have for an entire year. For a while there, they were every week. We have at least 2 finance committee meetings every month. That finance committee is in charge of looking at all of the bills that come and discussing them and looking at every single one before they get paid and make a decision on, based on what our expenses are they getting paid? Is it okay to pay them? It's looked at very, very closely by more than one board member. We work really closely with our accounting firm multiple times a week just to make sure that everything is where it needs to be and that we are all in the know about what's going on financially and where we're at, and so we can continue to move forward. So lots of checks and balances, additional checks and balances put into place. Really focusing on what is the need of our community. What service are they needing? And our community spoke and they said telelift. We need telelift. So we really focused this last year to make telelift the best it could be, make it as efficient as it could be. And I really think that we have done a great job with that. Our ridership shows that telelift is really, really needed. We are back to where we were as far as ridership prior to shutting down when we only had telelift. And that's considering that we were closed for the first 3 months of 2023. So focusing on just being efficient as we can and making sure that we're meeting the need of our community. And if any other needs are brought forward from the community, then as a board, we sit down and discuss, okay, our community says that this is what they need. Financially, do we have the support to meet that need? And just making sure that we're being smart about doing what services we are doing well and making sure that we're doing those well before we add any additional services.
And Lacey, so any transit system anywhere, and I think these numbers probably match up, but here especially, there's 3 essential uses: to get people to work, to school, and to the doctor, really. But transit services, regardless of size or location, are primarily subsidized through the federal government, through a federal program that's been in existence for decades and decades. I know there was a lot of work that the board and your accountants needed to do to basically get straight with the Nebraska Department of Transportation, who reviews and then approves your reimbursements, right? That's how the system is primarily
Correct.
Funded.
Yes.
Talk about that process and the fact that just recently, within the last few months, that reimbursement cycle has gotten back on track. The system has regained the confidence of the State Department of Transportation to continue operating its services.
Yeah. So Norfolk Area Transit was several months behind in receiving their reimbursements because of past management that we had and things not being done reimbursement-wise correctly. And so our board of directors had a meeting this past summer with our state auditor and the Nebraska Department of Transportation about what can we do as a board and Norfolk Area Transit to get these reimbursements going so we can have the cash flow that we need to stay open. And it was a really good conversation. It was a really good meeting. NDOT is incredibly supportive of what we're doing here in Norfolk with public transportation. They know that the need is here. It's always been here, and it's just getting greater. And so since then, the process is so much smoother. It's quicker. We, as a board, feel confident that we're getting back to where we need to be so we can be within that 60-day window of getting reimbursed each month.
Okay.
And that's traditionally what that would look like.
Thank you. And last question I had is, I know that you went through a search process for a new director. A new director has been hired, within the last 90 days or so?
The past 2 months, yes.
2 months, okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
And we'll add local. We hired local.
Yep.
So.
Yes.
Okay.
Lacey, have all the buses been, that are not being used, have they all been sold or to help restructure or your repayment of debt?
So our board, our finance committee and our board is continuing to look at that. Like I said, making sure we're as efficient as we can be. And that's part of our conversations. What do we have to keep to make sure that we're providing the best service that we can? And what do we not need to be able to keep the cash flow and keep our budget in line? So yeah, that's being looked at.
Do you have an estimated timeline when the unused buses will be eliminated?
I don't have a timeline. I can tell you some vehicles have been sold, and we're continuing to look at ones that need to be sold. It's not as easy of a process as it might be just selling your personal vehicle. You know, when you're selling buses, there's a specific target for that. And so it's a little bit of a process, but we are actively communicating with some potential buyers.
Lacey, some of those vehicles that are seen as buses are necessary because they're equipped to accommodate people with disabilities and handicaps. Is that correct?
That's correct. So even though we might have a very large vehicle, seem very large to us, it's very essential for somebody that might be in a wheelchair or something that, you know, our vans are just not equipped to transport somebody with in something like that, right?
Lacey, have you got established a goal for ridership to help continue to fund these?
A goal.
Yes, as far as the general public paying for the rides, as far as a goal set for the upcoming year to help with some of the finances going forward. Have you guys established a ridership goal that you want to target?
I can't answer that unless I have somebody else from my team that might be able to answer that.
Are you asking if we have how many rides we want to give?
Yeah.
Or,
Jan, we have to have you come forward if you'd like to speak.
we're limited at this point.
Can you say your name for the record?
I'm Jan Einspar. I'm on the board of NFAT. We're limited at this point because of our budget. And our budget we have so many people, we have so many dispatchers, we have so many drivers. And so we do have a limit of what we can't get too huge with this small a staff. But once we can get, so we can hire more people, then we can look at expanding what we do. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Lacey, is there an update or an opportunity
to add a route like the Wayne route with Lindsay Manufacturing or Tyson out of Madison?
We are having those conversations with those businesses, yes, because we know that the opportunity is there. We've done that route in the past, and it was very successful. And then we had to close our doors. So we are in the process of starting up those conversations again and seeing if we can get something going, because we know the need is there.
Along those lines, Lacey, besides, these are either hard commitments, the list of local match support that we're looking at. They're either commitments now or proposals like you're making at City of Norfolk now. But there are other efforts to raise money from the private sector for local match. Is that correct?
Absolutely. We have a fundraising committee within our board of directors who are looking at other private sectors that can be approached and being partners. Our board meets a lot. A lot of
Lacey,
meetings.
Sounds like it.
I do have one question, a couple comments. So the transit actually pays the senior center, don't they, for rent of that property?
That is correct.
So I do like the fact that if we're helping here on the transit end of it, we're also helping another, the senior citizen center, I guess it kind of secondhand, if you will, kind of a nonprofit. But I like that. I like the fact that we have an opportunity to help the community here, and based on your trip purposes, 50% of those numbers of those riders went to work, 25% went to healthcare. I mean, that's 75% of those riders that are either going to work or getting, some kind of medical care. So I do like that. I like the idea, to round it out, that you just have a local firm also doing your checks and balances. So
yes,
all that makes a lot of sense to me.
And we, like Frank said, we do still rent from the Norfolk Senior Center. So that's $36,000 that goes towards the Norfolk Senior Center's budget. We I feel like we have a really good partnership with the Norfolk Senior Center. We work really well together. We serve the same citizens. So yeah, it is a really great partnership that we have. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Lacey. Any other questions?
Lacey, I got one last comment that I don't know how comfortable I am with this ask, because this court case of why you guys shut down is still pending, and we don't know what the outcome is. I'm just going to tell you there's a little hesitation on my part, because we don't know what the outcome is, and we won't know that till the court case actually starts rolling out and all the evidence or whatever is presented. So I'm just going to say that I'm a little uncomfortable at this time, and for that reason.
And unfortunately, it could be months.
I know it.
Until we know the outcome of that. But in the meantime, we have thousands of people in our community that the need doesn't end. The need is still there. It doesn't go away. And while we wait for a court case to wrap up, what are our citizens supposed to do? Because we have many, many people that if they did not have North Fork area transit, they would not have transportation, plain and simple. And we found that out when the shutdown happened. We had many, many people that had to quit their job. They flat out quit going to the doctor. They did not go to the grocery store. And we had many families that they didn't see family or friends for months because they didn't have a ride. And so, although I hear your concern, but as a Norfolk citizen myself, my entire life, I don't want to forget about who it is that I'm serving and the great need that we have there. And we cannot forget about who it is that we're helping.
That's not entirely my concern. I've talked to a few people that have expressed this.
Sure.
So it's not me as a sole.
And I appreciate you listening to your constituents.
I'll just add one more thing here. When we give $100,000 to this organization, the organization gets $650,000 in return. So there's a 650% return on our money that goes to local vendors or to like the senior center. So the investment in the money, how it's repaid back to our community, is 650% return on our money. So when we spend this $100,000, it comes back in that way. So.
And that's not to mention all the people that are enabled to get to work every day and to school, and to the doctor who maybe wouldn't be able to otherwise. So when we're talking about economic development, quality of life, this all factors into it. And I think it serves us well to remember that there's a lot of people in our community that find this to be a critical service in their daily lives.
And I know as a board member, I can speak for myself that part of being on this board is also being the voice of those that need this essential service.
I'll just say, being on the board, the amount of time Lacey and Jan and Silver, everyone puts in, it's intense. I mean, no one's getting paid here. This is people that are passionate about transportation and getting people where they need to be. The controls and measures have been put in place. The board is diversified between community-driven people and businesses and business leaders and CPA firm. We've cut the budget. We've sold vehicles. We hired a local director. We've done all these things to build the confidence of this community, and I feel like we're on the right track to do that. We have reimbursements coming in now. I don't have much reservation with it. I feel like the storm is getting behind us, and we got good things ahead.
So to Corey's call out, how do we get that message relayed to build that confidence back up to the general public? I know we've got, and this is a great program. I know we've got several thousand citizens that use this, but for the other ones that may have reservations, like Corey mentioned, how are we getting this message out that Mr. Webb had just mentioned to the vast majority? How are we getting this message out to the people besides these confines?
Yep. So that's something that as a board of directors, we talk about in all of our meetings. How are we continuing to educate our community and what public transit is, and that it is for everyone, and who we are and what we do. And so whether that's doing presentations to our community, talking to businesses, talking to bringing riders with us to talk to businesses and potential donors. That's something that we talk about as a board all the time. What are we doing and what do we need to do more of? Are we doing enough? Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you, Lacey. Any other questions? Okay. Anyone else wishing to speak?
Jim McKenzie. I just want to say that I believe that this telelift service is critically important to the community. I've known people who've ridden it before it became Norfolk Area Transit. I saw it go through the transition to Norfolk Area Transit and the downfall and the restart. I just recently had a conversation with Justin, who's on the board, and I was extremely impressed with the changes in the direction of the organization and how it's been resurrected, and I'm 100% in favor of the city's commitment of $100,000 to this, and if we can give more than $500,000 to lighting in 1 year, I think we can give $100,000 for this service on an annual basis. It's critically important to the community, and as far as how do you get the message out, Justin needs to be speaking out on this because we talked and he really explained very well the great transition that's gone on, so thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Okay, any other discussion? Council? Hearing none, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, motion carries.
Item 19, would look for a motion to consider approval to advertise for bids for the Water Extension District number 129, North Highway 81, approximately from Sheridan Drive north to Eisenhower Avenue project.
I'll make a motion for consideration of approval.
Second.
Motion and second, and for some background on this, we'll hear from Steve Ramus, our Public Works Director.
Mayor and council, this is our request for permission to advertise. We're still finalizing the plans, but they would be ready before council would meet again. We just desire to get that project on the street, so hopefully we can be first in queue to get that installed this spring. So we would anticipate probably about a week and a half to be advertising that project.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions? Any input? Public input? Hearing none, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, motion carries.
Item 20, would look for a motion to consider approval of a professional services consultant agreement with Tool Design to create a safe streets for all plan for an amount not to exceed $298,979.30.
I'll make a motion for consideration of approval.
Motion second. For some background on this, we'll hear from Anna Allen, our Assistant City Engineer.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is a consideration to approve the professional services for Tool Design. Some of you might remember back in August of 2022, we put together, the City Council approved a resolution for a Vision Zero initiative for a Safe Streets for All grant, which we did apply for back in September of 2022. This Safe Streets for All grant is issued through the U.S. Department of Transportation. So the city staff, along with Tool Design, submitted that application back in September 2022, and it was announced that next January 23 that we were awarded funding for this action plan. So back in this last September, we had asked council, and they had approved requests for proposals, or we had requested to advertise for proposals. So we did get a proposal from Tool Design, and then we received authorization to negotiate a contract with Tool Design. So this is their contract in an amount not to exceed $298,979.30. In that grant award, we were awarded a total of $209,300 from the U.S. Department of Transportation, and then we had the cost share of $89,700. So this would be to put together the multimodal transportation action plan for the Safe Streets for All grant. In that action plan, we would go through, do community engagement, and that would involve an action plan committee, online surveys, some goal setting, and looking at our existing crash data and our existing policies and see what we can improve to establish this Vision Zero initiative and reducing fatal crashes and accidents in town. So if you guys have any questions, I can answer those.
Thank you, Anna. This program, Safe Streets for All, has been before the council prior in terms of first making application for the grant itself, correct?
Correct, yes. And then I'd also like to add too that this is the action plan. There's also another part of this grant opportunity for an implementation plan that we're working towards. So once we have this action plan completed, then we plan to put in an application for the implementation plan grant.
What would be an example of an action plan that they would present to you to for an improvement with it?
So, through, looking at the community engagement, looking at crash data. So, for instance, if there's a certain intersection that there's a high frequency of accidents or fatal crashes, they look at different, I guess, ways to make that intersection safer. So, if it's a highway, maybe it's improving the pedestrian crossing or something along those lines. Another part of the action plan would be to improve the city's policies and improve like our design standards and things like that when it comes to pedestrian crossings and sidewalks and things like that.
So did they take recommendations from the engineering department of what the engineering department would like to see, or is this completely unbiased on the findings that they find as they do a safe street study?
It would be, yeah, I would say it would be unbiased. It's, there's a lot of community engagement. So they put together an action plan, which would be members of the community, or an action plan committee. And then they would bring all of that data back to that committee and then go through and decide, what changes need to be made.
So it's really community driven then?
Yes.
Now, does this go through all neighborhoods, or just your major intersections?
It would look at the historical data. So they would look at, kind of the worst places first, I can't tell you right now what that might be or what intersection that might be, but looking at that historical data, but then also as a product of this action plan, we would be able to put together kind of a complete streets program. So that way we can have those, that kind of toolbox for this complete streets, and we'd be able to incorporate that into other areas of town.
Okay, so when they come up with these action plans, are these action plans feasible, or are they pie in the sky type things,
No, I would say they're
I mean, are they trying to do things that are
they're
like
feasible.
economically feasible to change this intersection one way or another? Not like,
Right.
say, you guys need 20 roundabouts in town,
No, no,
Right.
it wouldn't be
Just,
on that scale.
you know how-
No. It would definitely be something that would be feasible, cost efficient, easier things to implement,
Okay.
It wouldn't be redesigning a whole intersection. I mean, maybe, some areas, maybe it is making a big improvement to that intersection or something along those lines that would go into that implementation plan, but a lot of it is on a smaller scale.
So realistically, we can put this into the 1 to 6 year plan then, with their recommendations.
Yes, yeah.
And they're not gonna come in and say, this neighborhood has no sidewalks. And so in order for this street to be safe, we need to enforce sidewalks in this neighborhood, those are the things that.
Right. And I can't tell you right now whether that would be one of the findings of that action plan, but I do know, when that information does come back, that would come back to that action plan committee, but also comes back to the city council as well. So in this action plan, that also includes bringing it back to the city council, and going through those findings and what they would like to see implemented. So everybody would have a say in that. And then,
It seems good and dicey at the same time.
So, Anna, there was a match for the planning part of this, right? You said there was a grant for a majority portion, but we provide a match. What about the implementation phase? If we were to go through this process and then be awarded a grant, what does the local match requirement look like?
The next grant, then that implementation grant that we would apply for, that match is a 20% match. So what that, what our total for that implementation would be, I'm I'm not certain at this point what that total would be. I mean, it could be.
Because we don't know what
you
the
know,
plan all entails at this
Right.
point.
Mm-hmm. So we would just, you know, when it comes time to apply for that implementation grant, we would have to look at our budget and see where we would be able to get a match with the required match.
One last question, I promise. So they come in, they say, okay, you need to widen this street by such and such feet, or whatever you need to do to make it safe. I don't know what they're gonna all say. Say that doesn't happen, and then comes into somebody's insurance company and they say, you know, you were told by this company that you should have done this. Now, is the city's policy liable for something that it was brought to their attention, but maybe we decided it wasn't as important? And now I mean, where's that go? How's that work?
Yes, please.
So, yeah, so this will turn into a real project. You know, examples of things that I can just generally think of that have occurred over the last 6 years. We've had a couple fatalities downtown. Why did those occur? We've had some conversation around those, but we'll look at that. This process will look at anything that's occurred from a safety perspective: pedestrian safety, bicyclist safety, vehicle accidents. It'll look at real data around that, and then it's going to come back to us and recommend some project. Maybe it's you know, maybe the mid-block crossings downtown are part of that. Maybe there's ADA crossing access. Maybe there's lighting and intersections that need to be addressed. So it'll be maybe it's pedestrian activation systems. And we've had a couple requests come in to look at where the trail crosses Riverside up here at Georgia. Those are examples of things I can think of that, you know, I would expect would probably come to the table as a function of the community engagement process. And so it's not necessarily going to be per se a linear project, but it's going to be something that looks at the community, looks at the actual data, does that, you know, it'll analyze the data. The committee will get back together and formalize what do we want to put together as a community for a project. Might be a, you know, $1.5 million, $2 million project. I can't, you know, I don't really know what that's going to look like. And it's an opportunity then to get upwards of 80% federal dollars to fix those problems. And then Anna mentioned the complete streets. I think taking this, looking at the data, figuring out what's going on. Are there things we need to do geometrically in our design standards? Are there standards we don't even have in place that we need to get in place, so that as we build out our system, we can pull these standards that are addressing these issues?
So,
But then does it become the ultimate trump card? Like, okay, so if you don't design by these standards, then you aren't doing things properly. So like, say if they say we need to have First Street turned into a 2-lane with a turning lane down the middle from 4 lanes. And then all of a sudden you've got this committee telling you, well, this is what you have to do. I mean, it seems like
that process isn't going to tell you that. I'll tell you that.
Well, I know.
I think liability-wise, Shane, this would come across as a recommendation, but not a requirement from this, on the city standpoint. So they may recommend this is a good way to do it, but it's not required. So I think liability-wise.
I mean, nothing that would get implemented is going to be outside of any current standard engineering standard in terms of addressing lighting, mid-block crossings. I mean, it's all going to be within the design standards that are out there.
And Steve, it sounds like these are incremental incremental efforts to increase safety, as opposed to like wholesale engineering changes. Am I correct about that?
I think it's it wants to engage the community, number one. They made that real clear. They want to look at real data within the community in terms of incidents, accidents. There's probably there potentially could be some cost benefit analysis to it. DOT is getting that's kind of rising to the top of how they spend money. So, you know, without having the data behind you to show some cost benefit to that, you know,
So thinking back to council days, I think we all have times where constituents say, hey, this intersection doesn't seem particularly safe for pedestrians or kids walking to school. You know, there's a crosswalk, but what about lighting or other markers? So this would be designed to really study the data on those as to whether any additional measures are needed.
We have hearing impaired in the community, or seeing impaired in the community, and hearing impaired, and we hear from them on at least annually. I hear from them about issues regarding pedestrian activation. So potentially, you know, depending on what the data looks like, maybe we're updating as part of this project our pedestrian activation systems. I see it as, you know, let's identify the data first. We'll get back together. You know, there's a committee to this. I think elected officials are going to be part of that.
So does it boil down to the simple fact that we know we have some issues at intersections. We know we have some lighting issues because, obviously, people can look at an intersection and go, this doesn't feel safe. This simply allows us to have somebody else besides ourselves point it out to us, and then we maybe have the opportunity to get 80% federal funds to help improve those projects that we would have had to probably improve without those funding sources. I mean, do you see what I'm trying to get at?
Right,
I mean,
yeah.
That's what it seems like this is all about. Like, you gotta apply for it, then then you can be eligible for grants.
It's putting eyes on some of these things that with our staff capacity we never would be able to do,
but I mean,
regardless, and having most of it paid for.
Right, but you would have the opportunity to apply for those funds without this study being done.
Right, yeah.
The grant really wanted us, when we applied for it, the grant really was focused on partnerships. And actually, it was transit that was part of the partnership on the SS4A grant application. We did have some conversations with the county. The county actually chose to go after their own. We didn't really know how that was going to go. We thought we might each get denied. Ultimately, we were both granted. We both received the funds. But theirs is an intersection improvement project that they were targeting. So I see it as, well, I see it as potential to address issues. Until we get into it, I don't know what that's really going to look like.
Is one of the major issues of this going to be sidewalks?
I don't foresee that being the major issue.
Well, that's one of my hesitations here, is we have neighborhoods without sidewalks. Now you have a plan that comes in and says you need to have sidewalks, and all of a sudden we're saying we're forcing in sidewalks. So
right.
I
don't see this action plan as going in and picking out those areas that, you need a sidewalk. So with this tool design, they do a lot of this type of work, and so they're well versed in this Complete Streets program, and they've been working on some of these SS4A grants as well. So like one of their tasks in here talks about complete street analysis. So it says their design team, the tool design team, will analyze community context and the role of streets in providing multimodal connectivity, access, and mobility. So then using the data from the crash data, and they'll provide a general assessment of travel patterns across the roadway network to get an understanding of opportunities and constraints for a complete streets approach. And then they'll overlay those travel patterns and safety analysis, and go through that network analysis to then get public and stakeholder input to be used in that analysis and in getting that methodology for that complete streets.
The DOT, so exactly why I don't know, but as a function, I think as a function of this grant, some conversations that I've been having at the state level with regard to complete streets and the need to get that into our design standards, both at a state level and a community level. I noticed that subsequent to receiving this, I was put on a committee with, I believe the Secretary of Transportation's on there, a couple of the directors from the DOT. City of Lincoln has, I think the city engineer's on there, I'm on there. And it's a committee. Tool design is actually on there. They're the consultant that's on that committee. as well. And so we're having a conversation somewhat around SS4A at a statewide level, and just how we implement that for our state highways and bring that into our cities more uniformly.
I think I was a little bit hesitant when I first read this, but when you look into it, you're spending just under 90,000 to come up with a possible plan to only use 20% of your dollars to fix a problem. So if it is, say, sidewalks, it's not 100% on taxpayers living on that street, maybe, or the city in whatever situation that is, but we're only paying 20% of that project. Seems like a good use. The one question I think I would have is sometimes the most unsafe things in this city are the highways going through the city, and how this works in relation to NDOT and cost sharing of something like that.
Well, the DOT isn't going to cost share on this, other than the US DOT is the one providing the 80% grant.
But we can't really do anything on a highway without NDOT.
Right. What we can do, though, is we could, let's just go to the pedestrian activation system. If it's a pedestrian activation system, that would be a potential here for this grant. It could be other, per se, signal issues as well. But to go to, Shane, to your question about there's no they. The they is us as a community, and what are we going to put together for a project to submit for implementation. We are the they. Could it be sidewalks? Potentially. If, as a community, we say, hey, there's no sidewalk next to this school, and I got kids that walk to school, and they have no solution but to walk in the street. And as you get closer to the school, the foot density gets greater, especially if it's your K6, K8. So if the community, through our outreach, was to come and say, we'd really like to see sidewalks within a block of a public school or any school, and we'd have to take that into consideration as a committee and look at the data. What's the data say around accidents and incidents, around that school?
An example would be East Norfolk Avenue and east of, Cottonwood, which we decided to put in. There's a gap. There's no sidewalk connection going over the viaduct there. But as opposed to us coming to the table with all the money to fund that potentially is a project that could be 80% funded, because it was a recommendation through this action plan.
South Fifth Street going from Jackson Avenue, tying Tahazuka into that neighborhood. There's good.
So there's probably quite a few, which is
I'm
why we're
passionate about
engaging
that.
in this effort. Yes, right.
I'm passionate about that one.
We'll look forward to everybody's comments in the.
Also, the moral of the story is, while they do the data gathering, ultimately those recommendations come to us, and we decide what becomes the action plan. Okay.
Correct.
All right. Any further questions or discussion? Any input on this?
I believe this is a noble effort for safety, and I'm all in favor of improving safety, but I had some questions about how realistic the goal is. And so I did a little bit of quick Googling on the Vision Zero, and if I'm looking at it right, the Vision Zero communities, there's no other community in Nebraska that's doing this, is that correct?
Jim, on what other communities that are Vision Zero?
I see none in Nebraska, South Dakota, Wyoming, Kansas, or Iowa, so most of them surrounding us. It looks like most of them are large metropolitan communities that are doing this, from what I can tell.
Vision Zero is reasonably new, And we are.
Let's clarify. Are these the same things? How is this Vision Zero associated with
So
Safe Streets for All?
we did a resolution probably about a year and a half ago, might have been 2 years ago, towards Vision Zero. So the Vision Zero is about trying to attain zero incidents, accidents that are, I think, life-threatening, or if I recall correctly. It's a push. It's a push through the U.S. DOT.
Is it associated then with this at all, Safe Streets?
Yes.
It is, okay.
So I believe that's what your grant, so I did a little bit of looking, and so then I Googled a little more, and Denver was one of those communities, and they've implemented Vision Zero in 2017, so they've been on it for 7 years. And there was some news stories that despite what they've done, their serious bodily injury accidents and deaths, which Vision Zero is trying to get to zero, have actually increased significantly. In 2017, they had 292 serious bodily injury accidents and 51 deaths. In 2023, they had 424 serious bodily injury accidents and 71 deaths, despite their Vision Zero implementation. So I guess I just bring that up. Doing the study is fine, but I think doing some analysis on the effectiveness of what this program is probably appropriate before you spend a lot of money on implementation. That's all I had. Thank you.
Well, Jim, just to address that one issue that you brought up with regards to the accident injuries, I think if you look kind of citywide, statewide, there's really been a larger increase percentage-wise just from last year to the year before. So might be relevant, I don't know.
In terms of growth.
Good point.
Sure, yeah, I just think before we spend a ton of money on it, let's make sure that it's effective, so, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Okay. Hearing no one else, short title, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's just approval. My fault. Okay, if no further discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, motion carries.
Item 21 would look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5867, amending section 2-5 of the official city code to update water and sewer rates and to correct a typographical error in a building fee.
I'll offer for consideration ordinance number 5867.
Motion and second, and for some background on this, we'll hear from Steve Ramus.
Council Val has a presentation up here, and I'll walk through this. There's about 4 slides for water and 4 slides for sewer. What this is this is our water sewer user fee increase request for fiscal year 24 and our sewer user fee increase for fiscal year 24. The big picture here, we're asking for 6.25% increase in water rate and a 3.5% increase in residential 3.5% increase in residential and commercial sewer rates, and an 8% increase in industrial sewer rates that would go into effect on February 1st. We did present a larger presentation to the subcommittee on December 11th and answered questions to subcommittee, after which they recommended moving the request forward to full council for consideration. So I'll walk through the sewer, or the water user fee increase proposal. This slide here is presenting what our rates will look like in 3 years at 6.25. So our water model would show that we need 6.25% increase on water rates over the next 3 years. And this slide is showing you what that does for our water rate in comparison to some other class 1 cities. I would point out that I don't know what those cities are going to do over the next 3 years. And so as you're looking at our rate, this is a rate 3 years from now that is being compared to kind of our peer class ones and their rate as of today. So we have Columbus, Fremont, Norfolk, Kearney, and Hastings are the communities that are shown. Norfolk is in the purple. You can see at the lower user rate, again, even with the increases, we're pretty much right in the middle, below 750. As we start to reach 1,000 CCF a month, or see at 1,000 CF a month, we're in the middle. And as we move towards a very high user rate, we're still in the middle in 3 years with our proposed increase of 6.25 for those 3 years. Next slide. This is what our debt history looks like in our water enterprise fund. You can see that going back in 2001, we took on some debt. We took on more debt in 2004. We've paid that debt off. We are coming there. We do have a bond initiative in this year's budget, and so we'll be bonding for those projects. But in general, this tells me that our water rates are really in pretty good shape. That we do need to do some bonding for some big projects, but we pay those off and stabilize the rate after that. Next slide. This is the history of our water rates going back to 1994. And you'll see some big spikes in there relative to some projects. Just 7.8% back in about 1996, 10.6% in 2008, 8.5 in 15. Those are generally followed by some smaller rate increases. Our average rate increase on an annual basis since 1994 is just under 3.4%. Next slide. Here's what this year's rate increase, the 6.25%, would look like in a bi-monthly bill. The 5/8 inch meter, so this would be a minimum user, 5/8 inch meter, 650 cubic feet. That is bi-monthly. So that's 90 cents bi-monthly for that user. The moderate user on a 1 inch meter of 1,000 cubic feet over a bi-monthly billing cycle would be $1.48. And a heavy or a moderate user on a 1 inch meter, somebody sprinkling their yard using 5,400 cubic feet on a bi-monthly basis, their water bill would go up $5.88. Next slide. So this is the sewer user fee increase proposal. Again, this represents 3.5% this year, 5% next year, and followed by a 4% in year 3. Again, the slides here, you're seeing our fee, which is in this particular slide now is red. It's not the purple here. This is our fee in 3 years as compared to these other peer 1 class or class 1 cities, their rate as of today. So you can see we're even at the lower end, we're probably second lowest, and we pretty much stay through that almost all the way up. Okay, next slide. This is our debt history on our sewer side. You can see we have a fairly consistent outstanding debt issuance on the sewer side. This would tell me that in general, we need to look at our rates and understand why we're constantly in debt. And that goes all the way back to, this slide goes all the way back to 1991, but you can see starting in 1996, we've always had a fairly substantial debt on the books. Next slide. This is a history of our sewer rate increases since 1993. And you can see some peaks in there as we were doing specific projects. Over time, we've brought that down. We have not had any significant increases since about 2013, 2015. And then what you see on there at the tail end is the rate increases, 3.5% this year, 5% next year, and the rate model would show 4% going out from there. So just about average. The red line would be our average of all of that. Since 1993, we've averaged 3.97% rate increase. Again, here's what this the proposed sewer rate increase means for the average sewer user. For the bi-monthly bill at 650 cubic feet, it would be $1.37 bi-monthly. For the moderate user on a 1-inch meter at 1,000 CF, it'd be $1.71. And for that heavier water user, again, the actual water metered for this was 5,400, but the water that would be potentially measured and going down the sewer is about 1,600. So this is modeled as a higher water user in general. Again, that would be at $2.67 on a bi-monthly billing cycle. So those are the numbers there is. I do have some handouts on this that are available outside. I don't know if those were handed out, but if you wanted to have that for just general reference. But I'll answer any questions you have around the water model or the rate increases.
I have a question about the sewer model. Obviously, you saw that the debt service with the sewer department that was issued since, well, I think it went back to what, 90? Was it 91? 91, okay. My question is, I wasn't in the subcommittee last for this, but I did happen to hear you say something about the improvements that need to be done to the sewer, or
Right. So the water model itself, and we've just rolled over this fall. Historically we've used a spreadsheet that was developed by the Black and Veatch consultant that we use. This fall we moved that to a company called Waterworth, and I'll ask Val. Val, you want to bring up the colored slide there for sewer? She'll bring up our actual water. One of the end results of our actual water model. So that's the water rate. And here's the sewer rate model. So we model currently the 10 years that are in our CIP program. And that's what you see here. The red line, the red dotted line running across the bottom, that is our debt service. And so you can see our debt service there is something under $4 million. The black dotted line is roughly where we like to be in our balance above our debt service. Okay. The solid black line is our actual cash flow projection, or our cash balance projection as we look forward over the next 10 years.
Now this has already been adjusted for tonight?
So this has been adjusted, yeah. This represents, when you look at the top of that, you'll see fiscal year 2024, 5%. That 5% is an aggregate of the 3.5% on residences and commercial users and the 8% on industrial users. When you aggregate that together, it's about 5%. So within the model, it's modeled at 5%.
So going back to my questions on that treatment plant, what was the value or the dollar amount you were projecting for improvements out there over the next 20 years?
Oof. I don't have
crazy number.
Don't have that at my fingertips. Right now, what this model does not have, so this looks up to about 10 years. We haven't. When you look at our master plan and think back to the master plan presentation here, in I think that was November or early October, there is a fairly substantial plant expansion that would need to occur by mid 2040. That's about, in today's dollars, $45 million worth of plant expansion.
Yeah, that's what I remember.
And so that is not modeled in here because that's quite a ways out to try and understand. It is possible and probably more consumable for us to look at that plant expansion in halves. So we operate what's called a batch reactor, sequencing batch reactor. We have 4 cells. The 45 million in 2040 2045-ish, would represent a 4-cell expansion plus other things, our trickling filters and other things out there that would need to support all of that. It's possible that what we'll do here is we continue to look at this rate model, that maybe we separate that into a 2-cell expansion sometime earlier. One of the things that this, though, does drive me to is looking at a cost of service analysis so that we can understand, you know, future rate increases, and look at what's our cost of service to service all the industry versus our cost of service to support our commercial and residential side. So we are working on that. Would anticipate having that cost of service study available toward the end of April, first part of May, as part of our next budget cycle, so that we can see those pieces.
So
but this new software we're using has a lot better tools in it to help visualize kind of the end result of what your water model is telling you.
So with the current rate increases, especially on sewer, is that going to put your cash position better off? So someday there's, say, whenever some things occur, you're not having a drastic rate increase where it's.
I believe so. When you look at this, so we're forecasting 5% over the next 2 years, and then followed by 4%. So we're keeping that going forward at that 4%, which is our historical average. So rather than per se dropping that down to 2.5 or going all the way to 0 per se in 2027, 2028 or something like that. I think if we can keep it at that historical average, which was 3.97, roughly 4%, that puts us in a better cash position to handle future needs at the wastewater plant and within our sewer collection system. So our sewer rates support the treatment plant as well as support the collection system throughout town. Other questions?
Thank you, Steve. Any public input on this? Any further discussion? Short title, please.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska to amend Section 2-5 of the official city code to update water rates and wastewater treatment rates, to correct a typographical error in a building permit fee that went into effect October 1st, 2023, provide when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and to provide for the publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Ordinance number 5867 carries on first reading.
Steve, I imagine you would like to see this be enacted all at once rather than wait, yes?
Yes, because we are several months into the fiscal year, this conversation's been postponed, it both as a function of getting this new sewer rate model in place. So, yes, it would be nice to get this in place effective February 1st.
I'll make a motion to suspend the rules and waive the second and third readings.
Second.
Motion second to suspend the rules and approve on second and third readings. If no further discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Ordinance number 5867 carries on second and third.
Okay, last but not least, item 22. I'd look for a motion to consider resolution 2024-5 to remove the Madison County Industrial Tract CIT designation from property generally located north of East Monroe Avenue between South 1st Street and South Chestnut Street.
I'll offer for consideration resolution number 2024-5.
Second.
Motion second. For some background on this, we'll hear from Andy Colvin, our city administrator.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Try to stay with me here. I'll try to take something that might seem a little complicated and try to make it as simple as I possibly can. But in 1957, for background, the Nebraska legislature authorized what are called county industrial tracts. And basically what those were designed to do is to keep it on the fringe areas of municipalities, areas that are close, and industry would locate within these industrial tracts, and they would not be able to be annexed and be part of a city. That was, at that time, a good way that they viewed it as to encourage industrial development. So Norfolk right now, within city limits, we have a number of these industrial tracts. We can get into that discussion as much as you want, but for the purposes of what we're doing right here, we're really focusing in on what I would call two different properties. And primarily what drove this is some discussions we've had recently within the last few years about the stockyards. You know, for background, the stockyards, to my knowledge, haven't been in operation for probably going close to 10 years. I think it ramped down, and I think it officially stopped operations in around 2015, from what I recall reading about. Actually, I've been reading an article in the Daily News which has a pretty interesting background on the stockyards. So it is owned by, I'm sure, an estate or something of a man with the last name of Barta in Fremont. And so it was purchased, and that individual also owned a number of other livestock sales markets in Nebraska as well. So it was closed eventually, and it's been sitting vacant for a long time. And it has been a source of a lot of complaints, a lot of questions, a lot of what ifs, what abouts, what are we ever going to do with that? And as the city has started moving towards looking at, you know, how do we redevelop South Norfolk? You know, we've done some work on Northwestern Avenue and trying to revitalize some neighborhoods there. This property really did come up as a, well, what are we going to do with this? And I think the first step to that question is having it in an industrial tract really, in a lot of ways, takes the city out of being able to do anything with it. You know, projects like this and properties like this is what TIF was made for. This is what it was designed for, is the removal of blight and to bring in new investment and enhanced development into a neighborhood. But the removal of this and cleanup of this property to get it to be at a state where it's able to be developed is millions of dollars would have to go in for the cleanup. And those are just the things that we know about, much less if you get in and do soil samples and things. Who knows what you could find. So there's a lot of unknowns with this property. And so, you know, as a staff, we started looking at this with council member interest as well to try to decide, you know, what is it that we're going to do with this property. But again, the first step is to take it out of this industrial tract because it is not eligible to be annexed. Currently, it is not paying any city property taxes. So the whole area you see here highlighted in green is not paying any city property taxes today, and has not since its existence. So with this also, we have to look at the former Tyson plant as well. That is not one that's been a source of blight or any kind of or blight in terms of complaints and things like that. That's more of a development opportunity to find out, you know, what is it that we're going to do with that? What is the future of that building? Right now, it's not being used for industry. It's being used, to my understanding, for some cold storage, commercial storage, things like that. I don't know how much of that building is occupied right now, but certainly the stockyards are not being used for industry. And so there is a mechanism in state law that provides for a process to take these out of county industrial tracts. So what this is tonight is that first step. And basically what the council does is adopt a resolution like this, and then that goes in a formal request to the county commission, Madison County Commissioners. And they will have a hearing, they will go through their process, and then and state law is very specific on this, and Danny, you can weigh in here if I'm misspeaking in any way, but absent some compelling reason and argument that the owners are making that it should remain industrial, or it's being used for industrial, or they have some kind of plan for industrial use, the county commission shall take it out of the industrial tract. So I think in a nutshell, I tried to simplify that as much as I could. Danny, you know, do you have anything you want to add into that as to what exactly it is that we're doing here?
Not at this time. I guess if questions come up that beget other answers, but no, that's a pretty good explanation.
Thanks, Candace. Yeah. So I should mention as well, too, that state law only provides for this to happen on even-numbered years in March. So every 2 years, you have an opportunity to have this happen. So this will then trigger this will trigger an action that will take place by the March deadline once the county commission gets it and they can take action. I don't know the answers to why that is, but obviously there was a reason at that time.
So if the county sits on this, then, and March comes and goes, it's voided out then?
Well, I don't know, Danny, the question was if the county commission sits on this or takes no action or something like that, it goes nowhere. But as I'm reading a lot of these statutes, it's pretty strong language. Shall is used quite a bit in the statute.
Yeah, so once we make the request, the burden shifts to the property owner to show that they are operating the property in a way that complies with the 131111 designation. So if they don't show up, it's automatically removed. But once we submit this to the county, they set the hearing for March, and then the onus goes on to the property owner to come and show us why it should remain under the CIT designation.
And not to get too far into the weeds here, also in the backdrop of all this is potential proposal that pursual of state grant that would fund demolition of commercial properties that have fallen into disuse and disrepair. So I don't know if we want to make any comment about that, but that is potentially applies to property such as this.
That's correct, Mayor. That opportunity is out there. We're still exploring that as to how we would use that grant, but certainly that would be very helpful in this to get this cleaned up. But I think at the end of the day, this is a community development question. We've gotten complaints on this building. Our code staff have had complaints. We've gotten complaints from elected officials that you have all given us from your constituents on this. And this is something that's come up for a number of years, I think, in our residents of South Norfolk that has just been kind of let go. And I think they'd like to see more happen with this, or at least some type of a plan or direction. So whether it's a grant, whether it's a redevelopment project of some kind, I mean, regardless of what it is, our hands are tied in a lot of ways unless this is in city limits, because a lot of our tools in our toolbox are not applicable here unless it's annexed, eventually annexed. But again, the annexation is another question. The first question is to take it out of this industrial tract.
So, just to be clear on that, Andy, too, it says the resolution to remove Madison County Industrial Tract designation from the property located north of. This resolution is just to move it forward to the county. It is not actually to remove the designation.
The
correct?
the city does not
authority.
The city does not have the authority to do this. This is a request.
I just wanted to clarify the way that was worded.
You're correct, Councilman. This is a request to the county commission, who will have a hearing, and they will take the action to take it out of the industrial tract.
And this idea was presented to a subcommittee at which county commissioner was present. So there have been discussions with the county prior to tonight about this. All right. Any further discussion or questions or input from the public? Okay. Hearing none, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Resolution 2024-5 is adopted.
That concludes this meeting of the Norfolk City Council. We are adjourned.